Welcome, Ben. How you doing today?
Good. It's good to be here. How are you
It's
doing?
I'm doing well, man. It was just so interesting finding out that you knew my brother.
Yeah. Yeah. We've known each other like kind of virtually for years and years. During COVID, I was uh, racked with anxiety because I don't like to sit still. So I decided to write and publish a comic. And he's a comic writer himself. So that's how we got to know each other.
That's sick. What kind of comics do you typically write about?
So the comic that I published is called Apex. And it's sort of like a sci-fi story. It takes place in a city that was built on the Great Pacific Garbage Patch in like 100 years in the future, kind of thing. And it's about a girl who, um, well, she's kind of like an evolved form of human, so she's like a predator kind of human, and people are her favorite food. And so she spends her nights working at a fetish bar where it's the only place she can go where her teeth and her eyes, because she's got like predator eyes with the slits for her pupils. It's the only place she can go where people think she's cool and not like terrifying. So she works there by night, and kind of like an anti-hero, kind of like Spawn. She like finds shitty people and takes them down. Yeah.
Shit, that actually sounds pretty fascinating. It was like DC villains when they came out with the MMORPG where it was villains taking down other villains, and I'm like, this doesn't make sense to me. But
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I
it's
mean, she's
so
not a good person. That's the thing. She's dealing with her own thing, but she's trying to be better than the worst, I guess.
well. It when you think about that, it's like so I know when we were talking before we jumped on, it was about how does trauma and growth and resiliency actually come together. And a person or a thing being to an island and needing to fit in with people and taking care of other shitty people. It's
Hmm.
almost like the wounded healer in a way.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of the premise of the character. Was um, when I came up with the character, it was like when I was in university, when I was very young, like early 20s, and I it kind of started from an idea of like, um, sometimes a lot of people feel like outsiders, like they don't fit in, and they kind of take it personally, where they have a kind of visceral reaction where they consider themselves to be like their outsider status is like a badge of honor kind of thing, but they still want to be part of the crew, and they kind of struggle with that. And so the concept of the character was like somebody who technically isn't human, but still has to live in this human society. And so as much as she wants to keep herself aloof, she still makes friends. She still kind of falls in love, and she has to deal with the emotions that come with being a social animal. You know.
It's kind of like how I remember goths in high school and back in the 90s, and they prided themselves on the Jenko jeans with the chain wallets, the spiky hair, and it was like I'm not going to conform, but they conformed to their own ideologies, and they still
Right.
wanted to be part of society ish, but they wanted to be a part of their own society and their own love, and they wanted to be accepted for their own uniqueness.
Yep. Yep. That I mean, I was part of the punk scene. I know exactly what you're talking about. That was my whole thing, and we used to joke around about it, like we want to be different, just like everybody else.
When I kind of think about that, I'm like, oh, modern art, like Dada, where everything has to be so unique. It has to be the downfall of the regular art and then go into surrealism. And it's like, I am going to be so unique, but unfortunately, it's like, how far can we get away from something, but being so close to something at the same time?
Yeah, absolutely. And like, I'm a philosophy nerd, so I read a lot of philosophy when I was young, and I continue to read it. And one of my favorite quotes is Friedrich Nietzsche, where he said, "When you fight with monsters, you should take care that you yourself don't become a monster. When you gaze into the abyss gazes into you." Like
Love
it's
that
an
quote.
interaction. We're not separate entities. We're all kind of in a soup together. We're all kind of blending and marinating together.
Yes, I kind of think of that as like the macro scene of, or the macro version of what Jung talks about the shadow side, where
Mm-hmm.
you're starting to understand the darkness within you, but if you also understand the darkness within society, of how that actually becomes the extremes, where you have what you have the praise on one side and the outliers on the other, and it becomes more like the dumbbell effect. But it's also interesting. It's like we're just doing this podcast. This is going to be the 12th episode that I'm going to release. And the more that I've learned about people, I thought I was like, oh, I've been working as a peer specialist for years. I've had my own trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, I'm like, it's so interesting the commonalities between people. And
Yeah. I mean, we're more alike than we are different, really, especially in our responses.
yeah, it's, we will say something and we're like, I want to be myself, but I also want to be to fit in. And that's the conundrum with stuff. Because you're like, how am I actually fitting in if I'm also being different? And is it okay to be alone? Because at the macro level, we know as humans, we don't want to actually be alone. We want to be with people. But at the micro level, we also want to be individuals.
Yeah. I mean, that was kind of the story of high school for me. So you asked me to talk about my younger years. So like, I'll give you kind of the Coles notes of it. So I was born in '83. My bio dad was a Lutheran pastor. And my mom, brilliant woman, but at the time she was just a pastor's wife. Pretty simple life. And then when I was 2.5, my sister was born, and my father had a mental breakdown and ended up committing himself to an institution. Uh, so we kind of figured it out. We lived in some low income housing for a while. We lived in a place in Georgina, which is just north of Toronto, in a neighborhood that's still known as No Daddy Alley. Lived there for about 3 years, and it was pretty rough and tumble. I was there from 5 to 7, and then my mom remarried, and we moved into a couple new places with my stepdad. Finally settled on a home in a small town near, like, 5-minute walk from a lake. It was very beautiful. But my dad had his own issues. He was quite angry and didn't know how to deal with me, and so we had a lot of struggles. And I was diagnosed with ADHD when I was 10, and this was '93, so it was still pretty new on the scene. It wasn't like common knowledge like it is now. And so it kind of put me in a position where I was kind of the weird kid. So I've been put in the what they call the gifted program. So, like, I was a little quicker on the uptake, and so they put me in a class where they could accelerate what they were teaching, but I was also medicated. So the kids that were in the normal class, and I use normal in quotes, obviously, um, they they saw me as a brainer, right? That's what they called us. But the kids in my class thought I was a weirdo because I was taking pills. So I kind of just wandered around by myself for quite a few years when I was in elementary school, trying to figure out what the hell everybody else was doing that I was doing wrong, you know? Um, and then when I got to high school, well, it's kind of two things. I started making friends with a couple people, but at the same time, I started noticing that there were a lot of kids younger than me, particularly when I was in grade 10. I started noticing the grade nines, the freshmen, were getting picked on quite a bit by some of the other kind of bully kids. Because I was in a position where I could do something about it, I was like, I didn't pick a fight with anybody, but I was like, don't hang out with them, come sit with us. And so they started kind of bringing their friends in. And a couple years later, I'm not taking credit. It was just part of a process that was already kind of in motion. A couple years later, we had kind of taken over a portion of the cafeteria, and we didn't really have a clique. It was kind of anybody who didn't have a place to go could come hang out with us. And it was kind of like a philosophy of radical acceptance. And then when I got into punk rock, it was kind of a lateral move. We were already doing that. So, but yeah, I found that there is a way to find a crew and like a group of people, a tribe that you can fit in that aren't trying to get you to conform. But it's really about like maintaining an acceptance ideal as opposed to like a an agreement ideal, if that makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense. When I actually think about a lot of that stuff is how many times do we really get a chance to accept ourselves? And what we'll do is we'll cut off part of ourselves, or what I actually like to use as a metaphor is we'll put on another mask,
Yeah,
another layer for somebody else so that we're not really showing ourselves. And by using the radical acceptance, you're allowing people to what they will consider odd or not normal to actually just be normal, their selves, instead of being to the program. It's but it's kind of like when you think about the Matrix, or you think about how you got a cookie cutter, you get cut out of a mold, and since you're just a little bit lopsided, but that's you. It's okay.
that's right. And it's only lopsided if you think that there's a perfect. That's the thing, right? Like if there's a an ideal form to take, then yeah, you're going to miss the mark every time. But I have a musical kind of pursuit as well. And as much as like I'm in the pursuit of improvement, perfection isn't on the table. For me, it's like uh, trying to be better than I was yesterday isn't the same as trying to be the best. And um, if you're trying to be the best, this is the ironic thing of it. If you're trying to be the best, it's actually related to everyone around you, not yourself, because you're trying to be the best of all those people. But if you're just trying to be better than the person you were yesterday, then you're only competing with yourself. And that's the one person you know best. So you don't actually have to worry too much. And most of it's subjective anyway.
It's extremely subjective. Like they talk about the 1% rule: be 1% better than yourself the day before, and then
Mm-hmm.
you'll have this huge growth eventually. But
Yeah.
when you think about like being better than anybody else, how is that even possible? Everybody has their strengths, everybody has their weaknesses. And there's like this image, or what they're trying to say is related to Albert Einstein, but it definitely was not, where you have a tree and you tell a goldfish, a cat, a mouse, or and also a snake to climb the tree. Whoever gets up there first is most intelligent. But each of them have their own strengths, each of them have their own weaknesses. And that's why uniqueness actually matters, and that's how we're able to grow like further out in life. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
And like the thing I like about that metaphor is it's about environment. So some environments you're not going to be suited to. You're not going to succeed. And it doesn't mean that the environment needs to change. And it doesn't mean you need to change. It means it's not right for you right now. And maybe you need to keep searching. Like I had that. I mean, I'm on career 3 right now. I did pretty well in the first two, but there were parts of me that weren't. Uh, I just couldn't bring to the job because they were either not rewarded or punished for being present. And I noticed that the most last year, actually, when I started school for my new career. So I'm in school for child and youth care now. So I'm going to be kind of working with kids with various, I guess you could call them difficulties, challenges that they're facing in life, whether that's, systemic issues like poverty or developmental challenges, or maybe they're in foster care, that kind of stuff. I'm not sure where I'm going to land yet, but that's kind of the goal, is to work with kids who need a little extra support. And while I was learning about all this stuff, I was still running my contracting business and going on job sites with contractors, 20 to 60-year-old guys, mostly guys. And realizing that like as soon as I got my contractor gear on and pulled my tools out of the car, that there was this part of me that I had to kind of like put in the closet. It's like that person's not available here today, and kind of like put on a persona so that I could get through the day. And I don't blame the guys on the job site, you know. They're adapted to that environment, but I was starting to adapt to a different one, and I was feeling the effects.
It's yeah, like I worked construction for years myself, and like I told you before, I'm a work as a peer specialist. I work with veterans with PTSD, depression, MST, trauma, anxiety. It's interesting. If I was to go work on to go build a house again right now, I'm 40 years old. It would be like I wouldn't be able to have the same type of dialogue anymore. I wouldn't be able to have the same type of interactions, even though I understand the verbiage, even though I understand the atmosphere. It's not where I'm at right now in my stage of life. So I get it when you're talking about moving forward. But working with kids, it's really unique. What was the draw for you?
And there's a couple major things that come to mind. So I kind of gave like a brief synopsis of what my childhood was like. I didn't have support. When my real dad took off, there was no person to talk to. This is 80, what, 86, 87. There was no support system for me. And when I got older, my stepdad, he talked with his hands, to put it simply, and there was no way for me to kind of process it. And then he passed away when I was 18, right before my 18th birthday, actually, August 2001. And that left me with a lot of unresolved feelings and a serious lack of closure. And I won't get into a lot of detail, but I saw him in the hospital after he passed, and that's not the kind of thing you can unsee, especially at that age. And I just kind of carried it with me. I didn't really have any kind of outlet, or at least I didn't know that there were outlets available, and that carried through into my 20s, and I kind of hit my own version of rock bottom at a certain point, and realized that I had to work things out for myself. And flash forward, I'm 41 now, and at a certain point I started realizing that the thing I could do best was use this experience and be the person for kids that I didn't have.
Love it, man. It's being the man that I wish I had. That's a
Mm-hmm.
motto that I keep in my head. I have a similar childhood with my dad, but unfortunately, the way I look at it now, or I'll say fortunately, the way I look at it now, but unfortunately, the way I was grew up with him, he was a little bit rough. But when he got later on in his life, when he lost a lot of his mobility, you could just tell that he wanted to be kind. He just didn't have the words. And a lot of guys over the years, and I'm not giving either of them an out right now. What I'm saying is that sometimes they just didn't have the vocabulary, nor did they have the ability to be able to have the emotional expression. Emotional intelligence has been more on the rise for, say, the last 10 years, and maybe a little bit earlier than that, but more of that I've seen in the last 10 years, or maybe just because I've been looking in that area. It's You can see that people only are emulating what they know. And
Yes, absolutely.
you probably can agree with this. Like, you didn't have the best role model of a masculine figure. So you kind of like walked around aimlessly trying to figure out how to emulate that strong passive, like strong masculine energy.
Well, I had a mix, right? Um, you know, and this is the thing for anybody that's listening that doesn't understand what it's like to grow up in an abusive home. It's not like TV. It's not like TV where there's like the ominous music every time you walk through the door and the shadows run a little longer. And like, I wasn't scared of him, but he had a temper and I didn't know who I was going to deal with from day to day. And it definitely messed with me. Again, I'm not giving him an out, but by the same token, he was a kind man to a lot of people. He would give the shirt off his back for people. There's plenty of times. I remember this one time, like vividly. We were on our way out of town, and there was this man walking down the street, and he had his thumb out, and he was wearing a suit, like a full suit with a tie, and it was a boiling hot day, like not the day to wear a suit out on the street, and it was just a weird contrast, you know, this guy on a 30-degree Celsius, we do Celsius here, day, walking on the sidewalk in a full suit, you know, dress shoes, the whole nine. And my dad saw this guy and was like, let's give him a ride. And he got in the car, and my dad said, where are you headed? He goes, I'm going to the courthouse. And my dad was like, well, what's going on? He said, oh, you know, I've got a case, and I just, you know, I need to get there, and I'm already late. I don't know what to do, but I really appreciate your help. So we got to the courthouse, which was about 20-minute drive away. So I don't know how long it was going to take him if he walked. And uh, my dad walked him into the courthouse and spoke to the bailiff and said, you know, this is the situation, and we drove him here as fast as we could, and please give him a chance. And he probably saved that dude a lot of trouble that day. And we never met him again, you know. And the other thing is, like, when I was at my dad's funeral, I'm dealing with all these conflicted feelings, you know. Like, I'm thinking about, you know, there's this feeling of relief. I'm not gonna lie, not just for like our struggle is over, but also he was in a lot of pain at the end. And so, like, it was like he's finally in a peaceful place, and kind of so am I. And so there was this, like, is this okay to feel? Because I'm 18, I don't really know. And while I was there, two guys came up to me who I'd never met before in my life, and both of them said the exact same thing to me. They walked up and they said, are you Charlie Dobson's son? And I said, yes, I am. And they said, that man saved my life. And then they each told a story about how they were like in their worst place ever, and he gave them a chance. You know, gave him some money, gave him a place to stay, gave him a job, something like that, and turned their life around. And they were like, I'm here today at his funeral because I wouldn't be alive if it weren't for him. And this is a guy that entered my life when he was 48 years old. So that's a lot of life that I had no idea about. And it kind of made me realize, like, I only saw one portion of this dude, you know, and that's most guys. You only see the side that they present to you, but there's a lot more going on, a lot more things that happen to them or they've done for others that you don't get to see. I kind of made a promise to myself. I guess this is the other side of why I decided to go into child and youth care. I made a promise to myself at the funeral that I wanted people to show up to my funeral and say the same thing. So it's kind of like the the decision, like that's kind of the motivation for a lot of the decisions I make in my life.
That's awesome, man. That's, yeah.
What
It
came from
sounds like
tragedy.
you came from tragedy. You have compassion for for your father or your stepfather,
Yeah,
or kind of like
both.
your father. Yeah, yeah. Then you're able to try to transform it into, you want to care for other people. You want other people to show up for you. You also want to be altruistic in a way that you're not going to be repaid.
Well, I don't get to take it with me, but you know, two people showed up at my stepdad's funeral that hadn't been around for the entire time I was there. They found out that he was no longer here, and they wanted to pay their respects. So whatever my dad did, he didn't get paid for it, but they remembered, and like that ripples forward into the world. Whatever those two guys do after my dad did what he did is like, that's because of him. So like I think about that, like the little things you can do, like the smile you give somebody on the street, or like, you know, holding the door, you know, a couple times I've seen conflicts on the subway or on the sidewalk, and you know, the general tendency is to step back and just like not get involved because you don't want to get hurt. But I'm like, someone's going to get hurt. I want to make sure that the damage is reduced, you know. And usually things get de-escalated as soon as the third person steps in. If they're calm, usually things get kind of chilled out pretty quick.
That's a beautiful way of saying it. That just being around other people, surroundings, and actually showing up and being a good human can actually help prevent people from actually being victimized. I love it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So after your father passed, you said that you went into university, correct?
Kind of. So, um, the year my dad passed, I was in Canada. We had, at the time, it's no longer available, but at the time we had a 13th grade, which we called OAC, and it was basically to prepare you for university. So my dad passed, and I was supposed to start school a week later. Uh, and I did, and then 9/11 happened. And it felt like the whole world was coming down, you know? Like my life was kind of collapsing, and it felt like the global order was collapsing too. And I fell into a depression and ended up dropping out of school. Uh, Worked at a gas station, as a midnight attendant for a while. Uh, Started washing dishes in the kitchen. And then my family decided to move because we didn't really have anything holding us to that town anymore after my dad died. So we moved closer to my mom's family. And then uh, met a girl, moved to another town, another city called London here in Ontario, and then started university shortly after that. But uh, my heart wasn't in it. I was too distracted, and spent a lot of my student loans on booze, to be honest, and partied pretty hard. Made a lot of friends, but my grades were not that great, and ended up dropping out in second year. And then just worked in kitchens for a while and figured my shit out.
Yeah, when you're depressed, you try to get away from it as much as you can. You try to hit the dopamine as much as you can, and it's even partying. Like I run a group over here, and one of as far as substance abuse, and one of the things that we have asked people, are they really your friends when you are sober or when you're drinking? And then you start to realize they're more of acquaintances or good time Charlies. Yeah, it sucks, man, that you had to drop out, but it was like a blessing. You were able to try your hand at it, and even though it didn't actually work out for you, did you stay with that same girl the whole time?
No. um, that's the other side of kind of processing trauma, is that this might sound a little woo woo, but I think your kind of mind state attracts certain types of people. And it's not that you are necessarily attracted to them, but there's some sort of like resonance. Do you know what I'm saying? Like people feel it on you, and they might not even know that they feel it. I don't think it's a conscious thing, but you know, th- you know, certain birds of a feather flock together, I guess. And so I ended up. Um, there were some really great people that I dated during that time, but there were also some really difficult ones. And the person I started dating when I started university, was one of the difficult ones. Didn't last long.
Well, I'll share this. When you think about your trauma from your dad passing, and then all of a sudden, like you had the depression that hit with 9/11, because you said your birthday was September 2nd.
Yeah. So I call it the week from hell. So my dad died on the 26th or 27th of August. The day after that, my girlfriend at the time, well, I thought she was my girlfriend, broke up with me. The day after that, I got in a car accident and totaled the front end of my car. And then my birthday was the that weekend, and then I started school, and then the second week of school was 9/11. So it was like greatest hits.
Yeah, when I was actually, because I had something similar like that happen to me in 2020. My father, he ended up actually passing in September. My oldest brother, he passed away in December. And it was interesting. I actually noticed when I backtrack and I think about going downhill is when I picked my dad up off the hospital bed that was my mom's living room, and I put him on a gurney when the EMTs came. My mom begged with the hospital for me to be able to see him. This is the height of COVID. This is New York. Everybody's like super anxious. And when last time I saw him alive was like the last time when I saw one of my friends alive when I was overseas. And that image, that type of thought stayed in the back of my head, and I just kept going down, down, down. And I did some stuff, some disaster response to try to get away from them, get out of my head. And no matter how much I try to fight it, then my dad dies, and then my brother dies. And then it was January 14th of 21. I'm like, I'm done. It's just like not being able to process the traumas. We don't realize how much they linger on us, almost like an invisible like
Residue.
rucksack. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you carry it with you. Yeah. And then you just get accustomed to the weight, right? That was the thing for me, was like, and the other thing is when people point out, like, look at, what are you carrying on your back? You're always like, don't look at it. Um, and that was my experience. A lot of the difficulties I had in relationships were, as I got closer to the girls I was with, they wanted to know more about me, but there was this black box that you don't talk about my dad. And I didn't realize until I was almost 30 how long I just been like holding this kind of heavy weight and not letting anybody else talk about it. Not my friends, not my family, nobody. Um, until like I had no choice. I had to look it in the eye and I had to deal with it. Kind of what you're talking about with the shadow. That's the thing about the shadow, is it lives in the dark and you kind of have to look at it.
It's I've had two people on here that talked about their shadows. One was saying that he calls it the monster, and he has to open it up, and he does pottery to help it be able to decompress. And another one named it AJ. When I think about the traumas, it's I've heard it so many different ways. It's like, will I be judged if I share this? Why am I holding on to this? This is my secret. This is my. If I share this to somebody else, am I now burdening them? Is this actually going to cause them issues? Are they going to judge me? And they have all these different phrases, different thoughts, different, like, pretty much information trying to override your brain. You're like, nope, this is mine. I'm done with this. And what you realize is that it's kind of going back to that metaphor of putting that mask on. When you allow somebody to see you at the rawest forms, to be able to go back to what you said, radical acceptance. If you allow them to just accept you for who you are and all your traumas, then it's also kind of scary because it's like you have nothing to fall back on. And you're so used to pushing people away. Now all of a sudden I got a chance to live. I got a chance to be able to enjoy this relationship. This is so unfamiliar. This is scary.
Yep, that was my breaking point. Um, so I kind of like I was looking for trouble, you know, and I know, like looking back, I can tell this was tied to my stepdad because he saw me as a troublemaker. He was always looking to straighten me out, and I ask a lot of questions. I'm a curious person, but when you live in like a rigid kind of household, that is seen as transgressive. And so I grew up thinking that I was well, there's a part of me that I call the shithead, right? And he's the intrusive thoughts that I get when I see everybody's getting along, and I just want to kind of like kick the anthill and ruin it for everybody, you know. Um, and that person was running the show in my 20s a lot. I still was There's still a part of me that wanted to do good and be kind and care for others, but um, I liked the shithead. He was fun, and there's very little responsibility to take when he was in charge. So when I was 27, I moved to Toronto, and a few months after I moved to Toronto, they had this big event where the G20 showed up for their conference, and there was a huge protest, and it was the largest mass arrest in Canadian history. And guess where I was? I'd never been to a protest in my life. I was supposed to go to work that day, right? And I needed the money, so uh, I was going to go to work. But there was a part of me that was like, the shithead was whispering for sure. And when I saw that there was no way to get to work, I stuck around at the protest, and I ended up being beaten within an inch of my life by riot cops. They smashed my face. I took a riot shield right to the face, shattered my nose completely. Punching and kicking. They almost suffocated me, and I had to do 40 hours community service. But long story short, I walked away from that very angry. I'd always been angry, but now it was like I had a target. Like society was not to be trusted. And so I went around looking for a fight for a long time. And I got really lucky that I didn't make things worse for myself. But yeah, I kind of reached a breaking point, and I realized I can either like carry this anger around forever, and it's going to keep causing me trouble. The definition of insanity: repeating the same action, expecting different results. So I can keep punching my way through life and expect things to work out, which it never has. Or I can uh, try something different. And so the conclusion I came to is that I didn't know what was true. Like you said, I had no anchor, I had no kind of frame of reference. Once I realized that I was kind of messed up, I didn't know what I could ground myself with. So I just started from there. I don't know anything. And kind of built my first principles from there. I followed the philosophy method that I kind of like been obsessed with most of my life, which is like, what do I know for sure? Descartes. I know that I think. I know that like I have feelings. I know that like I have motivations. What else do I know? And then kind of build from there. And took a while, but you know, it got me into a place where I was no longer like expecting the world to change to fit how I felt it should work, and that resulted in a lot less anger.
So before we proceed too much further, have you ever thanked the shithead? Right, like that's the way that you
Man,
refer to
we're best friends. He's still there. He's
it.
still
It's
there.
like you provided me with a service. It was either get seen to take care of something. Like, let's be fair. When we're a shithead, typically we want to be seen by other people, so
Yep.
we're acting out, or we're like, you know what, this seems like it's too normal, and it's like, you know what, let's just spice this up a little bit. Let's just change it up. Let's get to something that's a little bit more consistent in my life. But I like how you were able to give more of the graphic of how the riot police, because as Americans, we would probably have been thinking in our head, were they saying sorry the whole time that they were hitting you?
I got to tell you, man, that's the reason I went down there. So on the news, I'm reading that there's a riot in Toronto. And in my head, I'm thinking, what does a riot in Toronto look like? A bunch of people like politely passing by and not saying, excuse me, But like it wasn't that intense on the protester side. But I don't want to get too deep into it. But basically, uh, it was kind of a security event that was used to justify an expenditure by the federal government. And so, like, you're going to spend that kind of money on cops, you better have some arrests. You know what I mean? And so, I think it got taken, like many things, when large groups of people are involved. They got taken out of control by both sides, and a lot of people have to deal with the fallout.
And I actually want to fast forward to the other thing that you were saying, where you were going off to Descartes principles.
Mm-hmm.
What I was thinking about the image, I don't know if you have ever seen tarot cards before, but
I read tarot. I've been reading tarot since I was 19.
the Tower card is what it
Yeah.
reminds me of. And when I was in the hospital working on my health, I had to draw a photo. And they say, draw something that resembles this. And this is what I'm thinking about when you're doing this. The tarot broke down. Everything is just all over the place. And what's the beautiful thing about it is you get to take what you want from it. You get to choose to leave everything or take everything. You get to choose to stay in the same place or not. But I take it one more further, where it's almost like a phoenix rising from the ashes of the fall. Even though it's a rebirth, you're still going to have all the memories. You're still going to have the same predictability patterns inside your brain. But you're also choosing at this point, I'm going to trust this process of failing forward. I'm going to trust the process of, hey, I'm going to choose a new route. And then when I choose this new route, it's not going to be comfortable. It's not going to be predictable. And I'm going to be, I had to learn this. I don't know if you've done this, but had to be super kind to myself when I'm trying a new things, even if it's a good thing I'm doing.
Yeah. So I love the tarot, and I love the Tower card in particular. And the thing about the Tower is, sometimes we build towers that are monuments to something awful, and we make them from pieces of ourselves. But once that tower comes down, we can rebuild. We can make something new. We don't have to make the same thing again. So that's kind of what I did. Was like the tower came down. It definitely came down, and I looked at all the rubble, and I was able to kind of like separate what was me and what was, I guess, versions of me that other people had kind of like presented. Like you get rewarded for certain types of behavior depending on where you are and who you're talking to. And so sometimes you take those on and you think that they're you, but they're not. They're like that person, or their aspirations for you, or their expectations. And so because I started with like basically wipe the board clean, I got nothing there. I was able to go, okay, what is actually me? Like if I clear out all the stuff, all the past experiences, and all the cultural expectations and all that stuff. What are the things that I know for sure are like a part of who I am? And for the most part, going back to the shithead, for the most part, the things I knew for sure were me were the things that I would not do, no matter how hard people tried to make me do them, because those were the things that they were a line in the sand. And so I took those things and I was like, what is it that I was refusing to do? Because it's not the behavior necessarily. A lot of times it's like the intention or the result. And like I quit a lot of jobs when I was in the kitchen. And I used to think that it was because I had a temper. But then I realized it's not enough to be angry. Like I was angry about stuff. So what was I angry about? And a lot of times it was injustice. It was like people weren't being treated fairly. And I didn't have the power or the influence to make a difference. So rather than stay there and let that be my normal, because I knew that was going to make me a different person, I decided to leave and like kind of, I'd rather be poor than stuck in this environment where I can't do anything to make things better. And then once I realized that, I stopped being angry about it. I was like, oh, I can just keep looking. There's no reason to get upset. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Just listening to it, it's like these helpless cycle until you were able to understand what were you looking for. Oh, looking for money. What was I finding? Well, I was finding another answer that was not being money. It was actually, what do I have? What are my values?
Yeah.
You kept seeing that your values kept getting rubbed, or actually kind of almost when you use like a Brillo pad to them, and it was just like more and more irritable. Hence, the blue collar field being a contractor, you come across there are different types of crafts over there, and
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I enjoy the trades. Um, I mean, at my age now, I realized when I was like mid 30s, about halfway through like running my contracting business, I was like, there's a shelf life on this, just on a physical level. Like you can't, it's punishing. And I didn't want to be one of those guys that I see on the job site that's like 55 or 60 and it's like, my back, my neck, my knee. Like I wanted to, quality of life is more important to me. So I wanted to kind of make a shift. I know I'm a pretty bright dude. So I was like, I kind of want to find a career where I can use my brain more than my hands. But I thoroughly enjoy it. And it was a major influence into why I decided to do this, because the two careers that I've had before this are culinary and contracting. And the thing they have in common is the vast majority of people who work in those fields didn't plan to work in those fields. It was like, well, kind of like me, right? Like I went to university, didn't work out, dropped out, worked in the kitchen. And then, fast forward 10 years and you're like, shit, I'm still here. I guess this is what I do now. And that can bring with it a lot of bitterness and a lot of disappointment, a lot of anger, especially when you see people who are genuinely passionate just leapfrogging you, which I saw. I saw like 19, 20-year-old kids coming in, and they make me look like a chump. They're so good at it. They have just such a natural affinity. Um, and at first it bothered me. And then when I started working on myself, once I saw those people, it was actually a catalyst where I was like, oh, there's got to be something that I have that natural skill with. I just got to keep looking. Ended up finding it with, what I'm in school for now and music.
Have you ever looked at music therapy?
It's definitely something I want to pursue. Yeah, I think, yeah, music is a therapeutic thing for me, 100%.
Because
The making as well as the listening.
they use music therapy in the VA over here in actually in Montana, but across the states. But they use it for PTSD, for TBIs. They use it for depression, anxiety. Also, how it actually like hits different parts of the brain. And there's a whole interesting cycle of when you're watching somebody do this, when they're just, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I would love to play the guitar. I would love to be able to be that dude around the fire, pull out an acoustic guitar, and people love my music and just want to be around me. And being depressed, or you're like, I don't have many friends. I don't have many people in my life that I call real true friends. And that's one of the parts. Then all of a sudden you start seeing them, they're getting it a little bit. And then all of a sudden they get stuck. And they're coming back and then they're starting to ask for help. These grown ups. And you're actually looking at them like, huh, or even kids, like, I want to get better at this. What am I doing? What are my stuck points? And then you're watching the finger placements and you're watching the way that they're moving, even the posture, the way that they're sitting, that they were, and then you have to help them change it and just tweak it. But it's so beautiful, each of the stages that you get a chance to watch a person do, because when they're actually excelling, they're like, hey man, I want to just show you this thing that I just did. Even
Yeah.
though to them it's like the best thing that they ever did. I'm able to play Happy Birthday on a guitar, and they're just super pumped.
Well, the thing is, like, I don't know who said it. I read it somewhere because the internet's full of cool stuff. But someone said art is how we decorate space, and music is how we decorate time. And I love that. And I also think like art and music kind of serve the same purpose, where they represent our feelings. They're kind of like this way because feelings are ineffable. They're not something that you can kind of like, they're hard to describe. Like if I say apple, you picture an apple. Pretty simple. If I say uh, disappointment, like we might picture an event, we might picture a person, but it's not going to be a thing that we can kind of grasp and describe to somebody. But with music, you can convey that in a way that, like, the most powerful thing that a musician can do, in my opinion, is present how they feel in a song and have someone come up to them after hearing it and tell you, this is how I felt, and it matches, because you're like, I got it. I captured it, right? And like, that's therapy. The ability to express your emotions in a way that someone else can understand. That's therapy. So, like, I think of, so I got to tell you about this guy. So, I'm in a band called Mute Sounds, and the name of the band is very intentional. So, the front man, the guy who started the band, he started it on his own a few years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. His name's Rui Pedro. He's from Portugal, and he has always been a musical person, but kind of took a winding route through life like me, and ended up being diagnosed with throat cancer when he was in his late 20s. And his whole world came down. He was living in Toronto. He had to go back to Portugal because that was the only place he could get the proper treatment. And he survived, but he can no longer speak. And so while he was, uh, going through the rehabilitation process, he took an old guitar that a friend had given him many years ago that he never touched, and he started playing it while he was in the hospital. And the cancer ward just lit right up. People were so excited to hear Rui play. And so he started writing songs, and then he wrote an album, and then he started playing it around Portugal. But the type of music he was playing, combined with his kind of new life of being unable to speak, made it difficult for him. So he came back to Toronto and he started looking for a band. And uh, I got lucky. I ended up being his drummer. But like for him and I, well, all four of us really, we all come at it from this place of like, music is for healing. Like we get together with fans, with listeners, and we paint a picture on a canvas for half hour, 45 minutes, or an hour, whatever. And we make you feel happy, we make you feel sad, we make you feel confused. And then we all talk about it together and kind of high five each other. And then, hopefully leave better than we came in. But he has this mentality of like, this music saved his life.
I work with this one veteran, and this is going to go right off to the story. He had to get a trach put into him, and he lost the ability to talk. He did 3 tours over in Vietnam. He was an awesome dude. He's really, really smart. But he has to use an iPad. First, he was using this little sketch pad. And he stopped interacting with people because he's like, who really wants to interact with me? Because I have to do this. He's an older gentleman, really bright. Probably reads about 3 books a week. And I love playing cribbage with this guy. It's just you're just watching a person communicate without words, and also just a yeah, like you could just tell what he's getting at with just these sounds. And I can relate to what you're saying about the guy with the throat cancer. I can relate to him because it's you're still able to communicate the emotions. Because let's be fair, most Americans and Canadians, we don't speak with the full range of the dictionary. We
That's for damn sure. Yeah,
and
totally.
even if we understand how to articulate everything perfectly and we knew everything, the other person that we're trying to convey the information to, they might not be able to understand with the precise verbiage. But what we can understand is emotion, like our voice inflection, our body language, our rate of speech, our octaves. They're able to tell like so much about this, and then thinking about this gentleman playing music and being able to express such passion without words is amazing.
Yeah, and because I think because he learned how to channel this new form of communication, um, it became like he is one of the clearest communicators I've ever known. And like he speaks in a whisper, and you have to watch him speak because you can't quite hear him, right? But he speaks with his whole body when he's talking to you. And I understand him exactly. The only time that he doesn't know how to explain something to me is when he doesn't have the word for it in English. And he'll turn to my Portuguese bandmate and speak Portuguese for a few minutes, and then Ralph will translate for me. But otherwise, like, again, like, clearest communication with Ralph. So, like, he doesn't have an issue with conveying. It's just this particular, like, we're used to talking in a certain way. And I think this goes back to what you were saying about the mask, right? A lot of times, this is what I've learned, and this is one of the things that I'm trying to work on with the kids that I mentor. Is a lot of times the mask we put on to fit in with others, we start putting it on other people with the expectation of, like, if you can't speak my language, then we're not talking. But it's like, if you take a step back and you just try and understand what they're, like, what mask they're wearing and what might be behind it, even, then a lot of the anxiety of communication and a lot of the conflict that arises kind of just falls away. And that requires, I mean, you're obviously a pro at active listening, but that requires active listening.
It's yeah. It's I'm actually going to circle back to the beginning of your story where you were talking about your childhood, and this is one of the things I brought up about, like, again, I'm not giving your bio dad or your dad a way out, but I think honestly, a lot of times men, and even for me for the longest time, did not know how to be able to display emotion. You used the word despair. To me, I thought of a black and white and a little bit of gray, and a guy hunched over with a white head with a black suit and kind of looking into a darker black void. When we don't know how to express our emotions, a lot of times anger is the easiest one. It's
Especially
usually
for men.
it's one that's tolerated the most.
Yes.
Going to why I wanted to started this podcast is that I feel like trauma is the reason that we get stuck with a lot of our verbiage, and also that you can change. You can change if you decide to want to go into that void. And when I say that void, is because it's unfamiliar to you, and trusting in it and actually allowing yourself to grow. When I listened to your story and you were talking about growth and struggle and reflection, what I hear is there was a young kid that was actually looking for a journey that he was on, trying to understand. When things actually fell, when they dropped, you weren't able to process your father's death. Then, when you're able to hear, I don't want to say contradictory stories, but stories that you did not understand about your dad. And then when you're able to say, holy shit, there was more to this man, a lot more to this man, then it's like, I wish I saw this man. I wish I was able to understand and experience him. But at the same time, it's like, where
That's
would
no
we
longer
not,
on the table.
yeah. How could we not communicate? Like,
Right.
what was going on that we couldn't communicate? And then going back to the mask that you put on somebody, it's like, hold on, let's take a breather. What's going on with you, man? Like, no judgment. We're having a fucked up day? Great, bud. We're having a shitty day. Let's actually talk about it.
Yeah.
Instead of actually saying, I want you to put the shithead on your shoulder, burn the whole school down so we can be able to have a conversation.
Totally. Absolutely. And the thing about, so something I've learned in school, which it made sense to me as soon as I learned it, but I hadn't really thought about it until it got brought up, was I took an entire class on trauma. And when we were talking about the definition of trauma, they were very clear that trauma is not an event. It is a response to an event. And two people can experience the same event, and for one person it's trauma, and for the other person it's Tuesday. And that really hit me, because I realized that there's this one kind of, like, pivotal moment just before I started working on myself and getting myself straightened out. It was just after the police situation that I was in. I was still healing. Like, my face was still kind of, like, in pain. And there was a girl I was dating who was trouble with a capital T. And I wish her well, but neither of us were in a good place when we were together. And um, we were having this discussion, and I put on the mask, right? So she started talking about my dad, and I said, "You don't know my dad. Keep his name out of your fucking mouth." And she, in retrospect, I know that what she was trying to do was hurt me when she said this. She wanted to cause a reaction, but it didn't work, and it should have. I don't know what was going on with me that day, but I was just ready to receive the message. And she said, "I don't know why you care so much about what that guy thinks. He's dead. He can't do anything for you anymore." And like most of the people I've told this to, they're like, "Oof, damn." But for me, I was just ready to hear it. And for whatever reason, when she said that, it just like went into a part of my brain and something flicked. And I was like, you know what? That's true. And it caused this like cascade of thoughts. And I realized the person that I had been trying to live up to, the person that I like created in my head, the shadow was like the version of my dad that I carried around with me, but it wasn't him. It was this, it was a boogeyman, but it was also a pedestal that I could never climb on. And I realized the real person was far more complicated. And what he would really want for me, if he was around, was for me to be happy and for me to be the truest version of me I could possibly be, regardless of like the past and all the circumstances that we had and all the difficulties we had. If he had the chance to heal and like improve the way that I had, he would want me to be successful and at peace. And I literally felt like I was going to float off the ground. It scared me to death, because I felt this literal weight just gone. And I thought I was going to kind of lift off the ground for probably about half an hour. And I was terrified. And then I was like, why do I feel this way? And then I realized I felt happy. And I hadn't allowed myself to feel happy for a long time because I didn't feel like I deserved it. And I've been like, kind of just like, don't be happy for like 10 years. And I finally just kind of like put it aside and just felt okay. And then it was like, what's next? You know? But that was a terrible thing to say to a person. It just happened to be the right time in the right place.
Or you were just ready for the message. Didn't matter who was
Yeah,
actually sharing it. Yeah.
sure.
It's so interesting when we think about, I guess I'll say happiness. To me, I read this book. It's called The Happiness Trap. And I don't know if you ever heard of it. It's based off of acceptance commitment theory.
Oh, yeah, I know ACT. Yeah.
When so many people want to just be happy, and when you keep trying to be happy, you keep going down this rail, and then you keep trying to have all these dopamines to hit, and then you all of a sudden you think you're going to be happy, but you don't realize that. And this is something that hit me, and I fully believe this. There's no such thing as a negative emotion. They're just
Yeah.
emotions. And when I allowed myself to start feeling emotions, I was like, happiness is cool, but being able to be sad or be flustered or actually being relief, it's just like it started hitting things differently. And when you talk about your happiness, it's just like what I heard was like the sense of relief. It was just like this huge weight that went off your shoulders. And it was just like, oh, jeez. But then it's like, I don't know if you have actually ever hit that panic when you did that because it's like, who the fuck am I now? If I am not this little spectrum of myself, who am I? And now all of a sudden I can be whatever I want to be. It's kind of scary.
Yep. Well, and the next 6 months were the hardest of my life, and like it was like my whole life just decided to collapse at that time. Um, but it's like the tower, right? The whole tower came down, but I looked around at the debris and I was like, I'm in here somewhere. And the thing is, as I kind of worked through that and started kind of, because you have to keep going. That's the thing. Is like even while you're going through this stuff and you're struggling and processing and trying to make sense of it, rent's got to get paid.
Mm-hmm.
Boss expects you to show up at 9 o'clock. So you keep going and you have these sort of momentary epiphanies as you continue. And what happened for me was I realized I didn't have to find myself because I was always around. I was always there with me the whole time. It was um, like I found glimpses of the true me in everyday stuff. Like when I'm going grocery shopping, there's a part of me, the shithead, wants to buy a pack of smokes and a bag of Doritos, and then the the true me is like, well, I want to feel good. I want to feel healthy. I want to be okay for tomorrow. I'm tired of being tired all the time. So let's get some healthy food. And the more I listened to that voice, the louder it got and the easier it was for me to kind of make that choice because of neuroplasticity, right? So like as you make different choices, your brain changes
Hmm.
and you get more confident in the choices that reward you with positive outcomes, like not just like dopamine hits like you were talking about, but like you see the effects in the world around you. And that was another big thing, was rather than denying the what my senses were telling me all the time and convincing myself I knew better, I started humbling myself and being like, actually, I don't know a damn thing. I'm going to start from, when I do this thing, what how do people react? Instead of going, oh, they can't handle me. Be like, no, maybe I'm a jerk. Maybe I need to like think about how I'm saying things. Maybe I need to think about how I'm coming across. And sometimes you're dealing with someone who wants to manipulate you. But give it enough time and you'll find that out too, if you're humble and you're kind of observant, right? So yeah.
Yeah, it's. I agree. I agree wholeheartedly with everything you just said, and I honestly feel like this. We just went pretty much through your whole life pretty quickly in a very quick nutshell, and it's just like you're being the truest version of yourself, or being the version that you would like to expose the most.
I think, and my mom agrees, that I am the most like little me, like 4, 5, 6 year old me, that I have been my whole life.
It's when we get stuck in those different ages, Freud. It's when we get stuck in certain ages, we keep repeating them, even though we just keep getting bigger and bigger, when more and more time passes, and it's almost like a net. But yeah, it's a very funny thing where we're actually showing that innocence, that human. Because like when you're 4 or 5 or 6, you have your own unique personality. You're just like a ball of goof, pretty much. It's just like,
Mm-hmm.
but you're still trying to figure everything out. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm still trying to figure everything out. Like that's never going to change. That's the thing, is like what I, in my opinion, this is how I see my old self compared to, um, the way I am now. Like the healthy me is that I'm not trying to be certain. I'm not trying to have all the answers. I'm just, I guess, uh, I'm certain that my experience has value, and I'm confident that I will figure it out as I go. But I don't need to know things for sure. I just need to, like, there's certain people that I trust in this world, but I don't trust them because I've been told to trust them. I trust them because they've shown themselves to be trustworthy, and they continue to, right? Um, but there are also people that I have had bad experiences with, and I tend to keep them at a distance. But when I encounter them again in the world, I treat them like it's the first time I met them, because I don't know what they've been through. They might be a different person. Like, I would like to hope that if I ran into people who met the shithead, that they give me a chance, right? So like, it's only fair. I got to give everybody else a chance. But that, like that that requires me to just um not believe, like drink my own Kool-Aid, I guess. You know?
Showing up, do the work every day. So, so I got a question for you.
Fire away.
what is something you were hoping to accomplish by coming on this podcast?
Hmm. Uh, well, I'd like to think that when we talk about our experiences, especially the darkest ones, the ones that like we feel like we'll never recover from, that people resonate with them. Um, I didn't get here on my own. This wasn't like a solo effort. Uh, there's been a lot of really kind people, men and women, and people who don't fit into those boxes too, who have given me the benefit of their wisdom and helped me kind of see things from a different angle. So I was hoping that I could do that for somebody. And secondly, I think it is really important for people to know that um, just by my presence here, uh, it's proof that it continues. That if you give yourself the time and you give yourself the grace, um, you're not stuck, not forever, and it's okay to ask for help.
Appreciate that. Benjamin, I wanted to say one last thing. It's been a pleasure, but I've actually noticed a theme from when you were a kid to when you got older and even in your profession. You've been an outlier, but you've been a protector of the outliers. The social injustice, or the people that are a little bit what they like to call diverse, or they like to use equity or inclusion. You wanted to protect other people so that they had the ability. And during that time, it was hard for you to be able to protect your own true and form. It it sounds like you're getting back to those roots. And I appreciate you coming on. And honestly, it was a pleasure to speak with you.
Same to you, man. I'm really grateful that you're doing this, and I can tell just from the conversation we just had that like you're doing the good work too. And I'm glad that man, it's a good thing we're not doing this alone.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you.